All right, so why don't we get started? First, I want to thank you all for coming out here to Ward 9, Moose Earl School, to talk about the issues that we have in the city. Now, can you hear me in the back there? Yeah, okay. So we do have this microphone. So when questions and comments come up, we want you to use the microphone so that you can, we're filming this so you can get it on camera. It'll be on local TV. What we usually do is I talk about a few city issues, and then we open it up to your questions and comments. But before we begin with that, I wanted to introduce you to some of the people that are here, the public officials that are here. We have John Sullivan, who is the Ward 9 Alderman, who's right here. Mike O'Brien, Vice President of the Board of Aldermen, former fire department member for how many years? 35 years?
35 years.
And a former state rep. Rick Dowd is the Ward 2 Alderman. Marty Jack is one of your state reps from Ward 9. So Marty, raise your hand. Everybody knows you anyway. Now, Will Darby, next to Marty, is a state rep, but he's from Ward 8. And he told me that he missed the Ward 8 one, so he wanted to come to his neighbor, Ward 9, so thank you very much. Now, we had received a couple of email questions concerning police issues. And so Barbara Costa, who is over there, decided to come, and she's the public relations, community relations person for the police department. And she's here in case those questions come up, with you today, with you tonight. So, as I said in the beginning, I'm going to just talk about a few things. First of all, I wish to dispel the rumor that Penachuk is being sold to someone from China. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, but there's some news reporters on this again. There's never been any truth to that. Penachuk cannot sell itself. Penachuk Waterworks is owned by the city 100%. They would need to come to the city to even propose that. That never happened. No one has ever suggested it. The Board of Aldermen would never approve it. So, I mean, it's just totally a false story. Now, what did happen, or what seemed like it might happen, is that a Chinese company did, or at least was talking with the owners of a former bottling facility on Northwestern Boulevard, which is way out on Amherst Street. And they were talking about buying that and then bottling water and potentially buying water from Penachuk. Now, that would be, the fact that a company would want to buy water from Penachuk is not unusual. Penachuk's biggest customer is actually Anheuser-Busch. I think it's like 10% of their revenue. But, and at one point, the company from China had filed some kind of planning board application to do some work at the bottling facility. But they've withdrawn that, so even the fact that they're likely to locate in Nashua is very unlikely. So in case anyone was all worried about that, I wanted to make sure that you knew that that was not true. Other things that I would like to talk about are, we passed the city budget a couple of weeks ago. And I asked the departments to try to come in with their operating budgets, meaning the parts of the budget that they have, over which they have control, at 3%. And they were all able to do that. And I appreciate that they did that. Because I know, the Board of Aldermen knows, that property taxes are high. We know people often struggle to pay. And we are trying to keep property taxes as low as possible, while at the same time delivering quality services to you, the citizens of Nashua. We are given a system by the state of New Hampshire that creates high property taxes, and we could get into the details of that if you wish. But I had asked for the 3%, but we had, which the departments met, the police, the fire, the schools, but we had a number of large items over which we have no control, really. First of all, city health benefits. The city provides health insurance to its employees, and we are self-insured. City health costs went up little over 9%, which is $3.4 million. That's a big expense for the city. The second large item, which we're hoping to reduce, is that the county tax, the county commissioners propose raising the county tax by 23%. Now, you may ask, what is the county tax? Because it's not well understood. The county government is paid for by the cities and towns of New Hampshire. So they assess each city and town based upon the assessed value of each community compared with the county Hillsborough County as a whole. Nashua's share is about 25% of the county tax, which in the current fiscal year is about $13 million. So we, this current fiscal year, which ends on June 30, the city has sent a check for a little over $13 million to the county. Manchester's share is about the same, and then the towns have smaller amounts. But the commissioners, one from Nashua, Manchester, and the towns, proposed this year a 23% increase, which on top of $13 million is around $3 million. Now, of course, I'm preaching to the choir over here because these are two state reps, sorry, and but one former, but they know very well that the county budget cannot be approved. It doesn't go through until it's approved by the county delegation, which is the state reps from Hillsborough County. And there are 140 some of those, and this will probably be voted on by the end of June. There's a public hearing on this on June 19th, and I'm working with the Manchester Mayor, Jay Rouet is his name, to try to persuade the delegation. And we're somewhat optimistic that that number can be reduced. But that's certainly is a possibility right now. Other big items are that the school transportation costs went up $1.8 million, and that's about 20%. As you see the school buses everywhere. These are the first student buses. The school department has a contract with First Student for transportation, which they have a legal obligation to provide. They put it out for bid, and they got only one bidder, First Student. And so it's basically a monopoly, and the administrators of the school department tried to talk with First Student to see if they would agree to something like a shorter term or something, to see if give us the opportunity, because it's a 5-year bid, so it's a 5-year contract. So could they do a year or 2 years or something? And the answer was not really, but if you wanted that, the cost would be much higher. So the school department really had no choice, gun to their head kind of thing, and they signed the contract. That's going up $1.8 million. Special ed costs are going way up. That's another, and the state's likely to cut back the reimbursement, the partial reimbursement we get for special ed. Special ed costs are going up dramatically as usual. So that's another big cost. Those are some of the big drivers of the city's budget and ultimately the tax rate. But let me and we can talk about that all further if your questions come up. The one thing I wanted to touch on before we turn it over to you is the housing situation in Nashua. New Hampshire, New England really, but New Hampshire, Nashua, we definitely have a housing crunch. Some call it a housing crisis. The rents have gone up dramatically over the last, it just keeps going, over the last 8 or 10 years. I'm sure those of you who are homeowners understand that the price of housing, of single-family homes, have also gone up very dramatically, around 10% a year for a number of years now, so that the costs are probably, costs are probably double what they were 10 years ago. And of course, this affects many people because young people cannot get into the market, have trouble buying houses, they also have trouble renting apartments. And the vacancy rate, for example, for rental units in Nashua is less than 1%. So it's a seller's market, no question about it. So in order to try to alleviate this, the demand, and of course the underlying cause for this is that the demand for housing exceeds the supply, meaning that there are more people trying to live here than there's really room for. The underlying cause is that there's not enough supply. So we are trying to help create that supply. Easier said than done. Focus more in kind of the more closer to the center of the city, where the density is higher, because I know that the single-family neighborhoods we have some very nice neighborhoods here in Ward 9 and throughout the city, where people really like to live, and we don't want to change the character of those neighborhoods through introducing a lot of multifamily units, right next door, anything like that. So we're trying to focus the development downtown, or at least closer to the downtown. And at the same time, we are trying to help increase the supply of so-called affordable housing, apartments that are rented for less than the actual market going rate. So if you look around, you will see that over the last few years, there was a project, Lofts 34 on Franklin Street was a mill conversion that opened up a few years back. The city sponsored and ultimately sponsored a development and ultimately sold a parking lot at High Street, between High and School Streets, kind of behind where Martha's is. That was completed and has been open for a little over a year. That's 150 units. We worked with NeighborWorks, a nonprofit, affordable housing nonprofit, to construct 46 units at right across from CVS on Main Street. Again, across from CVS, I think that's 249 Main. We worked with the Housing Authority to redevelop the Bronstein downtown, the Bronstein site, which is on Central Street, creating 210 approximately new units there. Right now, for the Board of Aldermen to consider on Tuesday, tomorrow, is the sale of the NIMCO site in the Mill Yard, which, after a long odyssey, which I could get into, but I won't unless you really want me to. But the city finally has had control of that site and is selling it to a developer after an interview process and the like for the development of about 300 units on that site, 20% of which will be affordable. And of course, the Bronstein Apartments, the now called Monahan Manor, the redevelopment of that site, that is all affordable. That's 100% off market at various levels of affordability. There's somebody building 75 affordable units on Crown Street. And there's the potential redevelopment of the Elm Street Middle School for housing, which we could talk about in more detail. So we are trying to do everything we can to help with the supply of housing. Now, oftentimes people ask, well, isn't this going to raise property taxes? Well, the answer is, actually no. I mean, a lot of these developments have very few kids, and for example, the High Street Lofts I don't think there's a single child in there, and the reason I mention that is that that's the most expensive service that the city provides, that is cost of schools. I think they pay about $300,000+ in taxes, and we provide almost no services. I mean, we don't pick up garbage, we plow the streets, and that's about it. Police protection, fire protection, same as everybody else. So with that, I will conclude, but let me mention one thing. We are now running for 5th, 6th year, I don't know, there was a little break during COVID, but we are running the City Academy right now, which is a course that goes over, I think, 6 weeks. 8 weeks? 8 weeks. They meet at the community center, which is on Arlington Street. And the various departments of the city go to the people who are taking the City Academy, and or that sometimes they do field trips, like to the this wastewater treatment plant and the like, and just talk about city government and each of the kind of basic functions of the city. This year we have 35 people in there in the City Academy. We have a waiting list. People that take it really like it, and since you're interested enough to come to a Ward 9 meeting, we appreciate your interest in the city. Maybe you'd be interested in the City Academy. So we've been running it once a year. I haven't yet raised the idea of it happening more than once, but more than once a year. But if you are interested, you should sign up for that. Also, the police department holds an annual police academy, right? When do you usually hold that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Sure, I can. Is that good? Good. So it's also 8 weeks, and all 8 weeks are held at the police department, and you get to hear all about our specialty units and the inner works. So we actually have an upcoming one at the end of September. So please reach out to me if you're interested.
So if you want to do that one, talk to Barbara, but you would be amazed at everything that the police department is involved in. The number of calls, the specialty units. We have been affected by the cuts from Washington. For example, this is just one of the things, but the equipment for the specialty units, which is the bomb squad, the dive team, and the dive team and the SWAT, yes, obviously, SWAT, has been paid for through the federal government. Now, the equipment is expensive. It's not like you need new equipment and you have to re-outfit everything every year, but as time goes on, those grants, it seems, have been canceled. So going forward, when new equipment is required, the city's going to have to pay rather than paying for this specialty expensive equipment through federal grants. Anyway, why don't I open it up now to anything you want to talk about? Yes, Sharon.
Wait.
Sharon Giglio from Ward 9 Board of Education. I'm in my 6th year.
Yes, I should have introduced. I didn't see Sharon.
That's
at the
okay. I was
beginning.
hiding behind Wayne.
Yeah. So Sharon is on the Board of Ed, and you've been on there 4 years or so?
6.5.
6.5.
Yeah. But I have a comment, and then I do have a question. I came tonight to ask about housing, but my comment is that I took the City Academy before I ran for the Board of Education, and it was seeing how everything in the city ran and finding out more about the school district that inspired me to run for the Board of Education. And so that's why I'm on the board now, because I attended that. It's very worthwhile. You learn a lot about how the city's run. But my question about housing is, are we better off now than we were a year ago?
The question is, are we better off on the housing front than we were a year ago? Well, yes and no. I mean, there are various units have opened in the last year. You know, the Neighbor Works project opened last fall, and we could kind of go through when these things have come online, but the demand is still there. So, and prices keep going up. You know, so so we're better off, but it hasn't solved the problem. I mean, and again, I mean, the kind of the silver lining of this thing, is that first of all, people want to live here because the quality of life for families and others is high, in my opinion. And number two, you know, that people aren't moving out to the degree people want to move in. So, and the silver lining for homeowners is that the value of homes have gone up so much. Now that increases the property taxes, but at the same time, you know, when it comes time to turn the home over to your kids or whatever, I mean, you have a much more valuable asset than you would without all these price increases. Yes. Yes.
Hi, how are you doing? I was wondering, do you have any idea of how many units short the city is and how much control we have over deciding the kind of units that go in?
All right, I couldn't hear the total.
How many units are we short? And do we have control over what kinds of units are made?
We are short a lot of units, in the thousands. We have some control over the types of housing that gets built. For example, and the principal way of controlling it is zoning. I mean, in this neighborhood, it's single-family zoning. You cannot build, you know, a 10 apartment complex, you know, out on any of the streets in this area. Downtown, the zoning restrictions are less because we're trying to, if we're going to have density, it makes more sense there. We are hoping to encourage, and John Sullivan, Rick Dowd, and some of the aldermen have encouraged this, and Mike, we'd like to see housing develop along in the Amherst Street and maybe the South End corridors. That's another area. Those are other areas where we could have more density without disturbing, you know, single-family neighborhoods. And there's some interest. There's some interest in that. I mean, I think that there is the I'm going to say, the possibility that housing would be developed on the former Dow site. Do you know where that is? In the Dow Chemical site, which was it's off Daniel Webster. Costco wanted to go there, and then they got in a big legal fight with BJ's, and this whole thing has like been in litigation for years. The reason I say it's a little difficult is the Dow, when they sold that site, placed a deed restriction which prohibits prohibits residential development. So they have to be persuaded to waive that deed restriction, even though they don't own it anymore. They have to be persuaded to waive that deed restriction for there to be residential development. So, you know, Costco is a possibility. You know, anything can happen on that site. But I just mention it as an example of the possibility that we begin to see more residential development in those commercial corridors. But it's often up to the landowner. You know, I mean, we cannot force someone. Yeah, it'd be great if where on Amherst Street, where Keeley Farms used to be. I don't know if you know where that is. Yeah, it would be great if they put residential in there, but the guy, the guy who owns it, whose name is Mr. Gordon, he doesn't want that. He wants to park Amazon vehicles there, so that's what he does. But if he were to come forward with a development, we would be very encouraging of that. Yes, ma'am, didn't you have your hand up?
Mayor?
Yes.
I've got this gal.
Yes.
Hi, thanks. So a couple questions along these lines. In the new Nashua Recode initiative, I noticed that Northeastern Boulevard is zoned commercial industrial. I feel like it's a little bit of a missed opportunity to not have that also as like a mixed residential commercial zone. I, for one, am in favor of increasing density in Ward 9 in general. I think it would be a good thing for all of our residents to have increased access to more amenities. And kind of a side note along that, and also a broader question, what are we doing to increase transit and biking and walking infrastructure in Ward 9 and Nashua in general? I bike my kids to school and it's dangerous.
All right, the first question is, what about Northeastern Boulevard? That would be another area where housing would be very interesting, and it seems like a good possibility. Now, you mentioned that we are rewriting the city's land use code. That needs to be adopted by the Board of Aldermen, and if the rewrite, which is designed to conform the zoning law to the city's master plan, recently completed 3 or 4 years ago, if it doesn't say we should have more housing, the Board of Aldermen could amend it, and I certainly would support that idea. Because again, like Amherst Street and Daniel Webster, there's an area. But again, I think we've had our eye on that for a while, and if someone came forward and said, even with the current zoning, we'd like to do a housing development over here, I think the city would do anything we could to try to make that happen. So a lot of these owners just don't want to do that. The Nashua Mall is another one. Okay, that's kind of underutilized at this point. The city's oldest mall, it would be like a good housing site, huge parking lots, everything. But the owner has to want to go forward, and often they just want to kind of keep doing what they're doing. And the second question was biking and walking infrastructure. Well, certainly we're working on that. There are 304 miles of streets in the city. Our walkability scores, if you look, and you can look that up, vary. They're better in some neighborhoods than in others. But the cost of improving the infrastructure is great. For example, one of the worst, and you asked specifically about Ward 9, but one of the most auto-dominated streets in the city is West Hollis Street, west of the highway. And for people who live there, it's even difficult to get on the street, especially if you're making a left turn. So we've taken a look at what to do out there, and we have a report, kind of a plan. Well, that's an $18 million project, and that's just one street in the city. So I think we are trying to work in that direction, but cost is a limitation. We've put.
From a Ward 9 perspective, right? If I wanted to get into downtown and not have to use a car that I have to then park and take up precious resources, and maybe I want to eat outside.
Yeah.
There's no safe way to do that right now.
Yes.
So having a pipeline from a ward like ours, where it's mostly car dependent and we're driving into the amenities in town, I think it would make a lot of sense for a pipeline, maybe on an old rail right of way or something like that, to get us across the highway into town.
Yes.
It would save a lot of money in some other places. And it's good for safety.
Yes.
Actually, is a way, it's not, it's a little out of the way, you've got to go to the high school and hop on the path outside of Mine Falls Park, but that will take you downtown.
Yeah, yeah.
You got to get to the high school, though, yeah.
You were next.
Yes.
Was it one of?
walk on Mine
I'm
Falls,
sorry,
you can go
ma'am.
from, sorry. Mine Falls is connected. When you walk on Mine Falls, you can start from Nashua High South and we can get to downtown.
Yes.
There's a biking and walking path there too. Yeah, but I know it is not.
So the point is, you can,
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
also from the whole Public Works area, you know, Riverside Drive, you can get into Mine Falls, go through Mine Falls, et cetera.
It has to be safe for us.
Yes, yes, sir.
All right, stand by. Didn't one of you ladies have a question? Okay, I'm going to take this lady first.
Yeah, okay.
sir.
It's just a quick question. What about Daniel Webster College? It seems like that would be a good area if you could get it for housing over there.
Definitely. So when we did so the question is, what about housing at the Daniel Webster College? So when we did the city's master plan, now that's privately owned and I will mention that in a second. When we did the city's master plan, supervised by a citizen board, the recommendation for that is medium density housing. So, you know, which would be 200 to 300 units there, kind of townhouse style. That's what they recommended. But Daniel Webster College is owned by someone from China. And the way that that happened was that Daniel Webster was a nonprofit, typical post-secondary educational institution and served the city, I think, in that region very well. But whoever controlled the college sold it, and where the money went, I'm not sure, but this is years back, sold it to a profit-making educational publicly traded company, ITT it was called. Well, ITT was shady, I don't know, maybe that's too strong a term, but ultimately they went into bankruptcy. And this was, they were making loans to, they were doing Pell Grants and stuff like this, I don't know. But they had very few physical assets. So when a company goes into bankruptcy, and the bankruptcy was filed in Indiana, when a company goes into bankruptcy, the bankruptcy court wants to pay the creditors. That's the bankruptcy law says that's what they're supposed to do. So they sell the assets and to the highest bidder, and they distribute the money to the creditors, the people who the bankrupt company owes money to. In this case, they held a bankruptcy auction in Indiana, and the high bidder was this gentleman from China who bid $12.5 million. By far the highest bidder. Now, we locally were rooting for Southern New Hampshire University. They were interested, but more at a $4 million level, not 12.5. So the bankruptcy court ordered that the thing be sold, that the college and its property be sold to this guy from China. He doesn't, you know, he doesn't really have any interest in doing anything with the city. I mean, he would lease, there's some stuff going on there principally through leases. Like there's a hockey school that rents one of the dorms. And then there's a company out of the airport that rents a little bit, but by and large, you know, it just sits there. And we would love to have a housing proposal, but, you know, again, the owner has to be interested in doing that. And I think would like to sell it, you know, for 20 million, but it's not worth 12 and it's not worth 20, you know, so it's not going to sell unless he brings the price to something something like realistic. So that's where we are.
Hi, Jim. We've known you for a long time.
Yes.
My question is, why do we need the density in the city? Why do we need to sell all this property? I was amazed at how many units went into that one spot up in the city. And in my neighborhood, they take property that's single-family houses, and yeah, because it's zoned R9, they put 7 or 9 houses in one lot. That changes the whole neighborhood thing. for me. And I mean, when I moved in here, there was fields and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I know, like every other town, including the one I came from in New Jersey, that's happened. But it just seems like the zoning in this town wasn't really conducive to good, I don't mind the density in the city, but when these contractors come in and just, tear up lots and cause changes in the basic neighborhoods, that disturbs me.
And I've forgotten, what street do you live on?
New Searles Road.
New Searles Road, yes.
Let me just add that when you densify these things, we're already having trouble. When I first came to the city, I had wonderful police and fire protection here. I seldom see them now. And I understand the budget problems, but, this is, when you're talking about trying, what is it? The city wants to get more tax revenue? What's the real onus here?
I think everybody heard the question. Well, first, I see the police department all the time. It struck me, we went to, Vicki and I here went to visit our daughter in Oakland a few weeks ago, and I never saw a police car. I mean, I was amazed. Of course, I live a little closer in, but I see police cars every day. I was amazed. In Nashville, I would have seen 20 cars, and in there I saw 0. But anyway, so I think the police and fire protection are very good to begin with that. All right, but but your question is about the zoning, and I think it requires, you kind of ask a whole bunch of questions in a way. But R9 zoning means single-family lots of 9,000 square feet, at least. Now that level of zoning for much of the city was created decades ago, really. And there are areas of the city, parts of Ward 9, that are not R9. There's R18, meaning 18,000 square feet, and there's some R40, meaning 40,000 square feet, or nearly an acre. And again, those zones were created a long, long time ago. If the zoning is R9 and there's a vacant lot, someone can build houses. If they can come up with 9,000 square feet per lot, they can build the houses there. If we made the whole city R40, or like Hollis, 2-3 acre zoning, I mean, no one could live here. I mean, the houses, it would drive the price, if we could still do that, which, we can't because most of the city is built. But if you could do that, if we had 2 or 3 acre lots, the houses would be, you couldn't buy a house for $1 million. You'd need to have more than that. Near me, unfortunately, we have something like what you just described, where we live, and near Greeley Park, and there's one house, a new house, not even the construction to me looks pretty, not the best. It's going for $1.3 million. It's just and it's got a pretty big lot. So there's that. But we're trying to, I think, accommodate a number of things. First of all, people want to live here. I get complaints all the time from parents whose kids can't afford to live here. Well, the more we restrict density, the more we restrict development, the higher the prices are going to go. Another common complaint from businesses, BAE, their people can't find. One of their biggest problems is they can't get employees, and they need to have housing. And so, just to provide a better business climate, we've got to at least have apartments for people to live in. And so it's trying to, I think, reach an appropriate balance between all this housing pressure, all the people that want places to live, and at the same time trying to preserve as much as possible, the character and quality of the neighborhoods that we have. And it is upsetting when, you know, there's a vacant lot and it's developed for housing, like 2 or 3 blocks from me. I mean, it wasn't a great, never really loved what was done, but it, you know, it happened. So I guess that's, I mean, I'm sure it doesn't probably satisfy all of your concerns, but that's the best answer that I can
Mayor, over
give.
here.
Yes, now, does anybody want to add anything from the Board of Aldermen on this or any of the other subjects that have come up? No? Okay.
Could I just add?
Yeah, yeah.
There are, I think a lot of you know that, thanks. I think a lot of you know that there's about 80, 85-ish condos going up on Ridge Road here on, it used to be a Boy Scout camp, and they bought the land. It happened when I first came into office, so that was 4 years ago, but there were some slowdowns. But there's about 85 condos going in down there, so I'm sure those of if you haven't gone down on Ridge Road recently, it might surprise you. But those are going to be open as well, so that adds to the tally. And I think it's
There's some affordability.
15 to 20% of the units are going to be affordable. So that just goes into the tally. But they're condos. They don't own the land. They only own the inside of the building. So, thanks.
But there's an example. I mean, this was Camp Doucette, Boy Scout camp. Now the city, at least I don't think the Board of Aldermen was even aware that this was for sale, but it was sold to a developer. Now, if it had come to the city, could we have purchased it to try to preserve that open space? Maybe, but it would have cost several $1 million. Maybe it would have been worth it, but we didn't have the opportunity. The same where I was. I mean, it was just not realistic for the city to buy it, or we tried, but you know, it just didn't happen. So it doesn't, again, it is upsetting when there is development which affects the character of your street, your neighborhood. And because, you know, a lot of us have been through it, but try to reach an appropriate balance between, again, I'm just repeating, but between trying to provide housing opportunities, given the zoning law that exists, which goes back a long way, and the need for the housing and the people who are trying to live here. Yes, ma'am.
Would you speak briefly about the about the paving in Nashua?
I should have brought that up, the paving. Oh my God. So well, let's put it this way. For decades, the city government, in order to save money, didn't repave many streets. And before I and some of the aldermen here came into office, the city was paving repaving 4, 5, 6 miles of streets every year. Now, with 300 and some miles of streets, we were on a 50 to 60 year replacement schedule, and most streets are not going to last that long. And so we adopted a paving plan of action where we, over a period of 10 years, are spending $7.5 million paving every year, which is about the maximum that can be effectively spent, given the requirement that the projects be managed, that curb cuts be done, you know, all this kind of thing. So we have either paved or crack sealed. Crack sealing is where you see, you know, kind of a tar stripe in the street, filling up the cracks. It preserves the street for several years without paving it. We've reached about 80% of the streets in the city, and there's science to this. There is a paving condition index. Every street is rated and re-rated every 2 years. from 1 to 100. And a kind of street that needs to be paved is like 60. A street that's terrible, like needs to be totally rebuilt, is more like 30 or 40. And a street that's in good shape is probably 80 or more. Anyway, we have increased the average PCI, paving condition index, from somewhere in the 60s up into the 80s over the last few years. So, and I think those are approximate numbers, but the average has gone significantly up. And that's even with the deterioration which occurs while all the paving is going on. So we've made significant progress, but it's cost a lot of money, no question. But we are in much better shape, and I consider that a quality of life issue. I mean, we used to get many complaints about paving. We get less, certainly a lot less now than we did before. We've got a woman back here, yes.
Hi, Mayor. I was wondering what happened when we had the Holiday Inn, and then were you guys not offered that property? Because you've got that would have been a beautiful housing for the elderly. Oh my God, I would have lived there in a second when I got older. You could have put in something there. We've got the parks. We've got, well, we won't even talk about Greenbrier if you need that one,
Yeah.
but basically you've got McDonald's, you've got all of the lawyers, you've got all the businesses there that older people could have and would have used, and the younger ones would have used it. So did we just lose out on that, or what happened with that?
All right, so the question, if you didn't hear it, is what about, and you can see it whenever you go up to Harris Road, what about the site where the Holiday Inn used to be and this new car dealership, which happens to be a Porsche dealership? I'm sure everyone in the room here will be getting one of those. And a Porsche dealership is going in there on Northwestern Boulevard right near Harris, Northeastern Boulevard right near Harris. And the question is, well, were we not offered the property? Well, except for a small group of city-owned parcels, the city doesn't go out and try to buy and compete with developers to buy property and then have housing. We don't have the money. We probably don't have the expertise. And in that case, if we had, no, we weren't offered. But even if we had been, we probably would not have developed it. And so we were not offered, but we're not really in the business of buying land and then developing it for housing. The areas where we already owned it. There was a parking lot on High Street. This Nimco property we obtained as part of the Broad Street Parkway, now the Veterans Memorial Parkway project, and a lot of litigation, which I could explain, but we'd be here the rest of the night on that. So anyway, we did get that, and now we're selling that. The Elm Street Middle School we own. That might be redeveloped for housing. But we have not gone out to buy property and develop it.
But there's no developer that would have come in that would have.
So it's the private market that really, whoever owned the Holiday Inn sold it to the car dealership, and that was it. I mean.
So they never tried a developer. They just kind of decided on the dealership, and that was it, huh?
They probably
Sad.
thought they could make the most money that way.
Oh, was it you next, sir?
Yes. So,
And the Bounty used to be there, so I remember seeing the Boston Celtics in the playoffs beat the Chicago Bulls. Michael Jordan got 60 points, but the Celtics still won. Larry Bird was on the team, watching it from the Bounty Lounge. So
Mr. Mayor, you've given me a great segue because I live a half mile up the hill from the Bounty Lounge.
yes, the former.
And it's the up the hill part that is on my mind right now because of the freakishly heavy storms that occur. I've forgotten the timeline now, but it wasn't the first time. And that water washing down the hill wreaked havoc, not just on Northeastern Boulevard, but on very many houses along the way.
Yes. What street do you live on?
I live on Lacey Lane.
yeah.
So is there anything the city can do as far as the improving the floodwater management or the rainwater management on that hill, or wherever we have other trouble spots in town, given that it seems like we are due for more freak storms like this?
Yes. Well, I don't know if the question was, what about the flooding that occurs from the hill up above Northeastern Boulevard and washes down the streets and often impacts people's private property, right? Well, in terms of your individual situation, Public Works could take a look at it and see if there's anything they could suggest. Oftentimes it involves trying to just redirect the water using curbing and the like, maybe sometimes fixing a catch basin, but directing the running water down the street to the bottom of the hill and trying to catch it in the sewer. And of course, we saw a lot of flooding in the big storm, a couple of big storms on Northeastern Boulevard. But we never please everyone. So I think it was on Greenwood, way up, kind of around the bend. I think it was Greenwood. So we get a complaint like this. So Public Works goes and the complaint is the water's running onto my property. So Public Works builds a curb. Now, like it was maybe 6 inches high. They made it out of asphalt. And then some neighbors say, well, we don't like that. I forget why they didn't, but they didn't like it. So I think they tried to go in and modify it a little bit. But, there's a lot of water, there's a lot of rain.
I'm thinking more about the capacity of the storm drain.
Yeah, well.
Going down that hill because they were
They overflow. Well, of course, we should talk to Public Works, but I mean, enormously expensive. Enormously expensive. Tens of millions of dollars. To dig up the streets, to replace the pipes, it's just really, really expensive. Yes,
If I
Mike.
may, in regards to your question, in notifying Public Works, it is the best idea. I don't know what's underneath the street, neither do you or anybody here, but Public Works, they do have a vacuum truck, and they could send a camera down to see if that is clogged. Usually when they put storm drains in like that, they do oversize them, to put them in.
I'm not concerned about my personal situation.
Yeah.
I have a very slight downhill slope on my driveway.
Yeah.
So, and a neighbor who had far more damage, had a much more severe damage.
Well, sometimes if Public Works works with the property owner, they can improve it. So I would suggest that person contact Public Works and maybe we can improve their situation. But it will just direct the water down the street, and or that's likely to be and we did have on Northeastern Boulevard big flooding a couple of different times. So to correct that would be really major money.
This
Yes.
gentleman and then this gentleman over here. Okay, I'll see.
Yes, sir.
I realize this is easier said than done, but what keeps us from using eminent domain to take some of these properties and flip them and then sell them for housing?
So the question is, why not use eminent domain to take property and sell it for housing? Well, a couple of answers, a couple of levels. Number one, eminent domain is always highly controversial. Number two, I think the U.S. Supreme Court has held that you cannot take a public entity such as the city can't use eminent domain to take property for a private purpose. So, so we couldn't take property and then sell it to someone else. we could, if we wanted to build a park or a school or something like that, or widen a road, you can use eminent domain to take property for a public purpose, but not for a private one. So, but again, just eminent domain, the person complains, it's a big uproar, it's just not great. Now, the PD here, we're getting close to 7. We usually try to wrap up in an hour so that people will come back. Won't be too bored, but we're near the end here. Does the PD, you have anything you'd like to offer, anything like that? You came, thank you very much. Why don't you come up here?
And please, this gentleman's also been waiting. Mayor.
We'll get you, let's let, you have anything you want to?
Come on in, Barbara.
All right, go ahead. Yes.
Okay.
Right. So I live in a community with our 22 houses on my street. In the last few years, we have had 2 burglaries. We don't see so much of a police patrol presence or things, and I thought that 2 out of the 22 is pretty steep for a rate, right?
And what street are you on?
Sky Country Drive.
Okay.
And so I feel like maybe we need to look at how or what is being done with the security a little bit
Barbara,
more.
why don't you come on up here? So did you hear that question? All right, so the question is, within the course of a year or so, there were 2 burglaries on Sky Meadow Drive. Sky Country Drive, sorry, Sky Country Drive. Which is,
happened in January. This January also this burglary happened at one Sky.
The SWAT team was there. The
The
burglar was inside and got caught.
did they go in through the 2nd floor?
No.
First floor?
Broke the window, went in.
So what in particular, I think I missed the first part of the question. All I got was there were 2 burglaries that happened.
Right. So I think in terms of the security, we don't see much of a police patrolling or anything in the area or.
So that's actually like a common comment that we get all the time. I think from like the quieter neighborhoods, whereas you're not interacting one-on-one with the officers. So we have officers there patrolling, and Sergeant Hannigan can speak more to that. But I run crime watch groups, and that's something that comes up all the time, like, oh, we're not making contact with officers. As the mayor mentioned, we've really expanded the size, and the needs of the community are, ever changing. So I think to the sir's point, that 101 is possibly decreased from what I think most people are accustomed to. That's not to say that they're still not driving by. With that being said, even at the best days, I think there are a couple of like Target burglaries that we've had in the past couple of years. So that's not necessarily equating to the amount of police presence, but as much as more of like the targeted crimes that we were seeing. So just because, and I say to this all the time, just because you're not making that connection one-on-one with an officer, it does not mean that they're not driving by your neighborhood. What I will say, and I think it comes up in this particular neighborhood, we used to have a crime watch group many years ago before COVID. So since then, we haven't really had one. What I say all the time is, if there's enough interest in this neighborhood to kind of start getting together again, and then to your point, if you're seeing an increase on cars that you possibly don't recognize, if we meet quarterly, you're able to say, hey, Barbara, I'm noticing this. In turn, I work with the sergeants, I work with patrol, and we're able to assign special attention. So that's also something that we can talk about. But all of that to say, just because you're not seeing the cruisers doesn't mean that we're not driving by, but we are always willing to get crime watch groups if there's an interest. The one thing that I ask is that, so from the PD perspective, we'll show up. How a crime watch works is if there are enough residents that are interested in getting together, we would need somebody to coordinate that effort, and then we come in, we look at calls for service, we look at different trends that are happening in the neighborhood. But we would need the resident support to kind of organize and get that going, because we don't keep people's personal information and we don't proactively reach out.
So crime.
Was there with the whole SWAT team, because we could hear for a couple of hours what was going on, and the police department was on time. Everything was working according to what they were, and it was very safe for all the neighbors. They didn't come out because police squad was there. There were about 15 team members, they were there, because we went to the scene, our neighbor called, they were not in town. So we went and we came back because we didn't know if the person inside is armed or something, because whole squad team was there. And I know police department has done an amazing job in a couple of hours to take that burglar out.
Good.
I'd like to
Thank you.
second that. I'd like to tell you folks from the police department that you've done, considering the increase in people in this town and the way things have gone and the restrictions that you have now versus 30 years ago. I want to say that I know because of what's going on that you're a little less present, but you do a remarkable job. You and the fire department need to have applause.
And one thing that I would like to add before we finish is we finally have our website up. And I get asked all the time as far as like what we host, like different events that we participate in. We actually really, our chief really is a pro community policing and is constantly supporting. So we're very active in a lot of different events with a lot of different nonprofits, a lot of businesses. So my goal is to have a community policing calendar so you're able to see different things that are happening. That way, if you want to come on a walk with us on Mines Falls, you can come and walk with us. So keep an eye out for that, and if there's any interest in the Crime Watch, let me know. But also, if you're interested in really getting to know the details about how we work, our inner workings, please sign up for our Citizens Academy that will start at the end of September, and that would also be with me.
So now, if you're not familiar with the Crime Watch concept, Barbara and others from the PD will get together with a group of people from a particular neighborhood on a periodic basis, like once every 3 months or so. And you talk through problems that you've had. They show you the police statistics for your area, like how many stops there have been and all this kind of stuff. And if there are particular problems, then they take that back to the headquarters and they address it. So if you're interested in a Crime Watch for Sky Country Drive, I'm sure, they're saying they'd be glad to do that. And I think you'd find that you'd get a good response.
Thank you.
All right?
Mayor, do you want to do one more and then the county budget?
Who's good?
This young lady.
Trying really hard to keep my kids at bay.
All right,
I can
so we're
ask
gonna,
my questions.
now we're gonna ask, I'm gonna answer, we're gonna deal with one more question from,
So I didn't say earlier that I'm on Marion Lane. Again, with the recode, I noticed we have a few municipally owned lots back in, our neighborhood, and I'm wondering what the chances are of getting some kind of park built. I feel like we have a couple little ones, right? But not everyone's within a 10-minute walk to one, and we don't have any water features south of the highway. So that would be my ask from a mom's perspective of two really little kids who is always looking for things that are walkable and bikeable to do with them.
well, we'd have to look at what we own. Well, I'm not aware of exactly what the city may own there. So, yeah, Kath here will keep that in mind. We'll talk to the planning department, see what we've got, okay? We have pocket parks in various places. So Marty Jack, who's the state rep, one of the state reps on the county delegation, wanted to address the county budget situation, and
I wanted to circle back on how we developed the county budget, why it is the size that it is. Every county, all of the representatives in a county are on the county delegation. Hillsborough County has 123 representatives. This term is 63 Democrats, 60 Republicans. The county commissioners propose the budget. It then goes through a process very similar to the state budget. We break up into subcommittees and analyze each department, and then it comes back together, it gets rolled together, and then the delegation votes on it. I'm kind of an expert on the county stuff. This will be the 13th budget that I have done, and we'll vote on it a week from Thursday. Just like the city, a lot of the budget is salaries. The county is responsible for nursing home, sheriff, corrections, county attorney. Those are very important departments. We couldn't function without them. And The people in the delegation have very sharp pencils, just like the people in the city, and they're not allowing the budget to be any bigger than it needs to be. I just got my tax bill. The county tax rate was 80 cents, and that's a very tiny fraction of the overall tax rate. So even if the county budget went up 10%, it would still be a dime in the tax rate.
All right, so thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And if you have any questions later on, talk to one of your aldermen or call the mayor's office. You know, we'd be happy to do everything we can to help out. All right. And follow up on the crime watch. All right, thanks for coming.